Before you go out and start buying up all those chickens and ducks and goats and cows, stop. Because there are 5 things I really wish I would have known before I started loading up my homestead, and you're going to want to know them too, especially if you want to avoid the headache, the stress, and maybe even some tears. Hi there, my name is Becky, and over here on this channel, we're all about reducing the stress and overwhelm, but still being able to build that dream homestead that you're wanting one step at a time. So if that kind of content is interesting to you, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of my other content. But without further ado, let's jump into it. The first one is going to be money. Imagine that. Animals cost more than you think. You know, that initial first purchase may seem enticing when it's cheap online. If you find them on the Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, or you have a friend that's willing to give you a free pig. That's how I got my sweet pumpkin. But long term, there is more cost involved. You have to think about feed. Okay, so whatever animal you're getting, how are you going to feed them consistently? You need to be able to add their feed into your budget. Just like you have to go to the grocery store every week, be prepared to go to the feed store every week for them. Or if you are able to buy in bulk, maybe that's monthly or every 3 months. That's a great way to save money, but not everyone has that opportunity. Besides feed, you're going to have your shelter and bedding. And once again, this is going to depend upon what kind of animal you get, but your shelter is going to need ongoing repairs. So is fencing, especially if you get an animal like goats, because they are notorious for getting out. And the bedding, you are going to have to be prepared to get the bedding. Every time it goes bad, every time you're cleaning out their pens, you're going to have to get new, fresh bedding for them. And then you have to think about vet costs. Okay, so whether or not if you're actually spending the money to take your animals to a vet, no, we don't want our animals to get sick. But just like us, sometimes it happens. And just like us, you get that bill from the doctor and you're like, what is my health insurance even for? Okay, animals don't have health insurance, and you have to pay up front most of the times. I had a vet come out to my home, and I had to have cash on hand to give to him as soon as he was done seeing my animal. Sometimes you can find vets, clinics that will do like a payment plan, or you can sign up with like a third-party agency. So like, and then of course you have to worry about interest. It's like a vet credit card. And that's just to make sure that your animals are getting taken care of. But it costs a lot of money. And even if you go the more like homeopathic route where you're doing all of your first aid yourself and you're doing your dewormers and your vaccines and your health maintenance by yourself, all of those things, all those products still cost money. So when you see that free goat on the Facebook Marketplace, be thinking of all of these things before you just go and pick it up. You need to make sure you're prepared budget-wise before you go pick that animal up and bring it to your homestead. Number 2, that most of these animals are full-time commitments, or at least full-time commitments at first. You know, you have your really easygoing animals like chickens and ducks. Cows, you can just go put out on a pasture as long as they have, you know, a basic shelter to seek in times of severe weather and a really good fencing system. But you still have to have the time to be going and checking on these animals. After you bring them to your homestead, it is now your responsibility to make sure you're taking care of them. You need to make sure that they have the proper food that they need, that they're getting the nutrition they need, their health maintenance, and that their fencing and shelter is secure. And it's your job to notice if they start getting sick and how to handle it. I firsthand know of a couple that went out and they wanted to have this homestead life, and they went through and they got all of these animals and it went fine for a while. But the thing is they like to go on vacation a lot. And I mean, like every single weekend they're leaving town to go do something. Now, I personally take vacations. You can take vacations while you have a homestead. You can even take extended vacations, you know, and make sure, you know, there's systems that you can set up to make sure that your animals are taken care of. You know, I have a lot of automated systems. I have friends and family come over to check on them and make sure that they're not out of water, or that my system didn't fail, and that they're out loose on my property somewhere, that no one's injured or hurt or whatever. But when you're gone as frequently as this couple was, it makes it really hard to make sure your animals are getting taken care of the way that they need to. You know, you're going to be missing when they're getting sick. You're not going to have the time to check their shelters and to check their well-being, making sure they're getting the proper nutrition, especially if you're working full-time on top of this. And that's where I'm going with this, is they're working full-time, and then they have all of these animals, all of these commitments, and then they leave every single weekend. And wouldn't you know it, they have a lot of deaths on their property. Now, I'm not saying deaths don't happen on a homestead, but how frequently they do tend to happen, I'm kind of leaning towards the side of neglect. So before you go through and start picking up all these animals, you need to make sure that you have the appropriate time commitment. And like I said at the beginning, not all animals require full-time commitment, but you still have to be there to check up on them and making sure that they have everything they need, because it is your responsibility for their well-being after you bring them home. Number 3 is going to be build first and buy later. I'm going to use my personal experience for this one, because when we first bought this property, my husband was really excited to get an animal out on pasture, and so the first thing we got was cows, right? Who starts with cows? But this fence line has always been set up, as you can see behind me, but it wasn't exactly equipped for the cows that we got. The cow his name was Houdini. His name was Houdini for a reason, because he disappeared all the time. I don't know how many times we had to walk that big guy home. We would get off work after like a 10-hour shift. Wouldn't you know, the cow is missing. We had to go looking for him and walk him back home. We got everything set up now, obviously, an electric fence appropriate. But when we first got him, like, we just went with what we had. And the fence was okay, but it needed more security in certain areas. The fence that we had, the electric fence, kept failing. We didn't have it set up appropriately. So therefore, he would just literally walk through like the fencing we had set up, because you have these posts spread out every so feet, and the person that had set it up, there were some weak spots, you could say. So he would just walk through it. And so that's why I always say, like, build first, buy later. You want to make sure that you have an appropriate area, shelter, fencing set up for these animals before you get them, especially if it's something as big as a cow. Cows are really expensive, so always make sure that you build first and buy later, because it is a pain in the rear to wrangle these animals when you don't have an appropriate fence set up or an appropriate shelter, and then you're last minute trying to figure out what to do with these animals. And it'd be just like goats, making sure that you have an appropriate fencing system set up. Goats are notorious to escape and get out. And so before you go through and start loading up your homestead with animals, make sure you have an appropriate fence and shelter set up for them to come home to. It'll be less stress for you in the long run, and you will thank me. Number 4 is going to be that the breed of the animal really does matter. You want to make sure that you're getting breeds that are going to benefit your homestead, or that are going to match the goals for your homestead. So, for instance, you wouldn't get a Jersey cow if you're wanting to butcher it next year. The difference between a Jersey cow and an Angus cow are very different, and it's going to be the same thing with goats. You know, a boar is more for meat versus like a Nubian would be more for milking, and then it's kind of across the board with all animals. I mean, a lot of them can be dual purpose, but a lot of them aren't meant to be. Just because you see a super cute picture of a pig or a goat on Facebook or Instagram doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for your homestead, and that's okay. Number 5 is always, if you've watched any of my other videos, is always to start slowly. You don't need to load up your homestead with a whole bunch of animals all of a sudden. That's the easiest way to get overwhelmed. Pick out one animal or even one project. It doesn't have to be an animal. Pick out one thing that's important to you and that is on your path to reaching whatever goals you're wanting, and start there. So if you want fresh eggs, you're not going to start with a baby goat, if that makes sense. So if you want fresh eggs, you're going to pick out a place for your shelter. You're going to build the shelter. You're going to create a run. You're going to do your research on what chickens are going to be right for you. Do you want to incubate them in the future? Do you want them to be pretty? Do you want to sell the babies? And before you go through and start adding more animals, make sure that you are in a good place before doing so. So make sure that you have everything you need for the animals you already have, that your budget matches what you're trying to add on to. So if you're already tight with the animals you have, so if you got 6 chickens, you went through and spent your savings on the chicken coop, and you have everything set up, and you're just getting eggs, and money's a little bit tight trying to get feed, and you're giving them chicken scraps, and you're doing all the things to try to save money, but you don't have a lot left over, then you should probably wait. That doesn't mean go on and get a pig, go get a cow, go get a goat. Make sure that you are ready before you add on to your homestead, because that's the last thing we want, is to get overwhelmed. We don't want you to give up, and it's okay to just not do everything at the same time. Everyone's journey is going to be a little bit different, and you should not be comparing yourself to any other homestead. Make sure that you're following what matches your goals and just plan accordingly. Buying your first animals is always exciting, but it is a huge responsibility too. A lot of times we get caught up in how cute they are or what they can do for us, and we neglect to think about all these tiny little things that will eventually add up over time. I hope you take these 5 little tips into consideration before you pick out any more animals or pick out your first animals. And tell me down below in the comments, if you already have animals, what's the first thing that you started with? And if you're getting excited and wanting to start getting animals, what do you want to get first? I'm curious. And if you like this kind of content, please like this video. It really helps me know what kind of content to keep doing, and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on anything else. And I will see you guys in the next one.